Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hello Word, the podcast where we explore the fascinating world of English vocabulary. I'm your host, Alex, and I'm thrilled to have you join me today. Our word of the day is bombing. It's a B2 level noun, and it means an attack using explosives. So, bombing refers to the act of dropping or detonating bombs, typically from aircraft or other vehicles, or even planting them. Think of it as a forceful and destructive attack involving explosives. In everyday language, you might hear about the bombing of a city, a building, or even a specific target. It's a term that, unfortunately, often appears in news reports relating to conflict or acts of violence. Let's delve into some synonyms for bombing. A close synonym would be attack. For example, the city suffered a devastating attack during the war. Another synonym could be raid. We might say, the rebels launched a raid on the government building. We can also use the word assault. The enemy launched an assault on the front line. Finally, consider the word shelling. The shelling of the port continued for days. Notice that while all these words refer to an act of aggression, bombing specifically denotes the use of explosives, often dropped from the air. Now, let's explore some antonyms. Because bombing signifies destruction and aggression, antonyms would be words that imply peace, construction, or preservation. One antonym is peace. We could say, after years of conflict, the country finally achieved peace. Another contrasting word is construction. For example, the construction of the new hospital began after the bombing destroyed the old one. We can also consider rebuilding. The government initiated a rebuilding program after the war. Another antonym is preservation. The museum focused on the preservation of historical artifacts, despite the threat of bombing. And finally, restoration. The restoration of the ancient temple was a long and delicate process. You can see how these words stand in direct opposition to the destructive nature of bombing. How can we use the word bombing in everyday life? Well, while we hope to avoid using it in its literal sense, we might encounter it in news reports, historical discussions, or even in fictional contexts like movies or books. For example, you might read a headline that says, "Bombing in the capital city causes widespread damage." Or you might hear someone say, "The museum has an exhibit detailing the bombing of London during World War II." The word can also appear in phrases that relate to rapid failure or collapse, like, "The play bombed with the critics," though this is an informal and figurative use, and not the primary definition we are focusing on today. Let's look at some more direct examples. The bombing left many people homeless. The government condemned the bombing as a terrorist act. The bombing campaign lasted for several weeks. Authorities are investigating the bombing at the train station. The bombing completely destroyed the bridge. The survivors of the bombing are still struggling to rebuild their lives. The bombing highlighted the urgent need for international cooperation. The news reported on the aftermath of the bombing. The area was evacuated after the bombing. The constant bombing forced many residents to flee. The effects of the bombing will be felt for generations. The security measures were increased following the bombing incident. The city is still recovering from the devastating bombing. The bombing shattered the peace of the small village. The international community responded to the bombing with outrage. The bombing prompted a national day of mourning. Evidence suggests the bombing was planned meticulously. The bombing was a clear violation of international law. Witnesses described the chaos following the bombing. The bombing resulted in numerous casualties. The investigation into the bombing is ongoing. The threat of bombing looms large over the region. The bombing of civilian areas is strictly prohibited. The bombing marked a turning point in the conflict. So, to recap, bombing is a B2 level noun that describes an attack using explosives. We discussed synonyms like attack, raid, assault, and shelling. We also examined antonyms such as peace, construction, rebuilding, preservation, and restoration. Remember, bombing refers to the act of using explosives in an aggressive manner. That brings us to the end of today's Hello Word episode. Thank you so much for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Your support helps others discover the show and expand their English vocabulary. And now for your challenge. Create your own sentence using the word bombing and share it in the comments below the video. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Until next time, keep learning and keep exploring the wonderful world of words.
Goodbye.